and we'll get going. Actually, hold on. I'm already recording. I'm just going to pause. My brother's going to start playing piano really loud, and I'm just going to tell him not to do that.
Her brother's like the co-star of the podcast.
Oh, I see.
Fantastic. He's always got something going on. It's good. I can't remember what this. Oh, Marat had a good tweet from the Athletic about the Simba Lion King tweet, and then she started an episode and her brother came in and threw the Simba or something. I can't remember.
Oh yeah, no. Marat was just trying to praise Cole Perfetti, but it was like a messed up. It was like a meme kind of gif where what's his name, Rafiki throws Simba off the cliff.
Right.
Yeah. And I started with Marat, and I staged my brother, and my brother comes in. He's like, "Hey, Alyssa, I'm gonna watch The Lion King. Do you want to come?" And then it was very funny. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah. I was just saying he's like the co-star of our podcast.
Yeah, he's a little bit everything, that guy. He's volleyball player, piano player, all that good stuff. So great. So I'm already recording this, so I'll just get started. Great. So hey everybody, welcome back to the Centric podcast. It's Lyss here, and we have kind of an interesting episode for you today. So it's myself and Chris here from the Centric podcast, as you all know, and we're actually joined by an Oilers podcast today, sort of two little branches of it. I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves in a second, but not right away. I'm just going to sort of tell you about what we're going to do. So you probably have heard our episode with Marat that we had earlier, sort of talking about the specifics of the Jets and sort of how the season wrapped up, what's the situation right now, whatnot. We wanted to sort of talk a little bit more about the specifics of the upcoming series against the Oilers from a perspective that's not just Jets fans who are like, ugh, once we can shut down McDavid, and if Mike Smith stops being good, then we'll be able to beat them, just kind of get a little bit more specific than that and all that fun stuff. So we are joined by Michael and Eric, and Michael, maybe I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself first, and then Eric, you can as well, and then we'll kind of get going.
Sure. Thanks, Lyss. Thanks, Chris, for having us. My name is Michael Hebert. I am the host of the Oilers Live podcast, the Heavy Hockey podcast, and of course the live weekly stream Oilers Empire on EliteSportsBetting.com. Just happy to be here and pretty excited about another series between Winnipeg and Edmonton that hasn't happened in what seems like forever. And I'm happy to talk to you guys, and it's good we're social distancing because who knows how mean it could get, right? So off to you, Eric.
Yeah, hi, I'm Eric Friesen. I'm the host of the 99 Forever podcast on the Oilers Live channel with Michael. And about 3 years ago, I started being a fairly regular guest, I'd say, wouldn't you, Michael, on his various podcasts, and then he invited me in 2019 to begin hosting my own podcast on his channel. And since then, I've been hosting the 99 Forever podcast and joining still on his podcast from time to time whenever he's needed me to fill in. So yeah, that's how we're pretty much connected.
Nice. So
Nice,
quick fun little icebreaker then. You host the 99 Forever podcast. Do you think McDavid is going to be better than Wayne Gretzky? Do you think he already is better than Wayne Gretzky? What are your thoughts on that? I'd just like to know, just for fun.
For sure. Well, here's the thing. I actually debated this on a recent episode. Not so much debated, but we talked about where McDavid stands in terms of the Oilers' all-time greats. And I think natural talent and greatness can be different things in a sense. So greatness usually has something to do with championships won, playoff success, that sort of thing. In terms of natural talent, you could argue that McDavid is already one or two all-time in Oilers history. In terms of greatness, to knock Gretzky off the mantle would be almost impossible as the captain of 4 Stanley Cup teams and the incredible point totals. I think that depending on how the rest of his career goes, if he stays in Edmonton, there's a chance he could contend with Mark Messier for number 2 in terms of Oilers lore. But as of right now, I have him sort of pushing top 5. It's so hard to say that he would be greater than those guys. But yeah, at this point, he's definitely in that conversation of top 5 players in Oilers history. However, I do think he will pass Wayne Gretzky as the Oilers' all-time leading scorer. Not his NHL stats, but specifically his stats in Edmonton.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, no, and I actually really like that kind of the way you're separating the two of them, because it can be so hard. There are a lot of amazing, talented hockey players that finish their careers with no Stanley Cups to show for it. And it's sort of hard to put them in contention with a lot of those guys who are able to drag their teams to cups and whatnot. So that's an interesting, I never really thought of it that way. I mostly just think of it from the talent perspective.
Right.
But yeah, no, that's fair enough. Yeah, Chris, I don't know if you want to kind of start us off with maybe some fun little conversation to sort of get going on the series and what we're seeing in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. We've had quite a lot of shows. We've been doing intermission shows and stuff like that. So we've been communicating quite a lot as a podcast the last 2, 3, 4 weeks. And a lot of people aren't giving the Jets a chance, really. I know I personally predicted the Jets in 6 just because. Well, we'll get to that. And I know a couple of our friends on Twitter have as well. But more often you're hearing, oh, they don't really have a chance. Here's the thing. We've been talking about McDavid, Draisaitl, the top line, this and that. And in all of our conversations, even when we're talking about the fact that we don't think the Jets have a chance, all of us who can be really tough on the Jets all seem to think that we have much, much, much more talent outside of the top line. How do you guys see that kind of breaking down, or are we right that we're deeper? And not that I want to be right, but it just seems it seems like it's a mismatch. Like the top line is a definite mismatch if we run against Scheifele's line. McDavid could put up 25 points in 5 or 6 games if they play that line, but when you look at the rest of these two rosters, I would take the Jets any day. So how do you see that breaking down as you go through a 7-game series?
Michael, you want to go first?
Yeah, look, if you had asked me, given the lineup that the Oilers put together at the beginning of the season, if you were right, and I would have said 100% for sure. There have been some players that have stepped up for Edmonton, specifically Darnell Nurse, who has been absolutely outstanding. And outside of Edmonton, I'm not sure that people are talking about him as much as they should be. He has been not just an offensive machine on 5 versus 5, but he's also been a defensive stalwart this year. He's been out. He's just everywhere and seems to be playing really well and picking up the slack for Edmonton, missing out on Clefbaum. Now, you're 100% right. If you go forward depth, Winnipeg's got the advantage. Outside of Draisaitl and McDavid so far, we haven't seen, a lot of, bottom 6 scoring, even bottom 9 scoring in Edmonton, right? Now, in my mind anyway, it depends on what Tippett plans to do with those two lines, right? Does he separate McDavid? Does he separate McDavid and Draisaitl, and how that comes about? It seems to me that the Oilers have had some luck bringing in one of their prospects in McLeod, who looks like he's set to kind of break out and do really well. And he kind of evens that out a little bit, but I'd still give the advantage to the Jets in terms of overall forward depth. But I think that, frankly, what needs to happen for Winnipeg is that Scheifele line has to stop leaking goals. Like they're, defensively, they've been absolutely horrendous lately, right? And if that carries on, it's going to be a short series, right? Mm-hmm. Hellebuck, though, as well. I mean, you guys, he's what can you say? The guy's an all-star goalie, right? And so, that's the kind of goalie that could steal a series. And that's probably my biggest worry about going into the series against the Jets. And then my other worry is, the reffing changes come playoff time. And I don't think the Oilers are going to get near as many penalty chances, and they didn't get a lot to begin with. Most Oilers fans would complain to you that they only count, maybe 10% of what actually happens against McDavid, and then in the playoffs, it's going to be about 5%, and so you'll see those power play chances go down. Winnipeg's got a great shot. I still take Edmonton to win this because I think that McDavid and Draisaitl are at that point in their career where they're just going to take it to another level, and they have during the regular season. And that's the way I see it. I don't think you're wrong, though. I think probably all the reasons what you said, I think the Jets have a legitimate shot.
Yeah.
Maybe the fan in me says Edmonton, but yeah, and the season series says Edmonton too, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's that.
Yeah,
I think I said this, we did a bit of a live stream last night, and I kind of want to reiterate my point because a lot of people actually kind of agreed with me, and I didn't really know this is how I felt until I said it. So my prediction right now is Oilers in 5, just because my biggest issue is that the Jets don't know how to contain McDavid, and they don't know how to, let their scoring lines score and let their defending lines defend. Like, we have people always talk about the defensive powerhouse that is the Adam Lowry line, and then they're playing defense against Zach Cassian or Alex Chason or something like that, where you have, like you had said yourself, someone who's not even a Jets fan can tell that our top line is just atrocious in the D zone, right? So my thought is that the game ends in 5. If we can find a way to contain McDavid, if we can find a way to even win 1 or 2 games, I think that that's going to be like the key and win the series kind of thing. But I'm not optimistic that that's going to happen because they had 8 games to figure it out this season, and they could not do it. At the beginning, we were like, wow, Neal Pionk is the noted Connor McDavid killer, because he did a pretty good job of sort of pushing him out, not letting him get a ton of great chances off the rush, but there was just way too much. Like, and again, he's Connor McDavid. Like, what else are you going to do? Like, he is very talented, and he's the best player in the NHL by a landslide, but he doesn't, he has a ton of points against the Jets this year. I'm sure there's a stat that says he has most of his points against us this year, because it's probably the case. Other teams have found ways to manage him, and I think the Jets probably could, but they just haven't seemed to figure it out yet. I don't know if, Eric, you want to touch on that at all?
Well, I just wanted to say, I think Ottawa's the only team he produced better against. He had a multi-point game in every game against the Jets this season.
Awesome. I love hearing that.
I had something in my brain and I just froze. I think that I was going to touch on another point there before we pass it over, was the Connor Hellebuck thing. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and a lot of times when we talk about a goalie stealing a series, we have this 3 shutouts and a 1 goal against sort of thing. That's what we think of. I think a goalie can steal a series with 2 big games, right? You win a game 4-3 or 5-4, you win a game higher scoring, but then you get lucky, or maybe not lucky if you're Connor Hellebuck, and you steal one that Edmonton has 43 shots and you win 2-1, right? And so when you've got the best goalie on the planet, those things can happen too, for sure. That's obviously, I'm the same as you, Lyss. I'm jokingly picking the Jets in 6, but I really have Edmonton in 5, if that makes sense, because the Jets can win. But it's one or the other to me. They're either going to get their asses kicked, or they're going to do what you guys are saying, kind of shut them down for 2 games, get a goalie win, and win it, because they are capable of that.
Right. Yeah. So when, as Oilers fans, kind of when you look at how your season shook out, independent of the Jets, sort of what is your big hope in the playoffs? Like, what are you looking for from your roster? Maybe I'll throw this one to Eric next. And sort of what is going to be I don't want to say the key going forward kind of thing, but one of the most important things, is it going to be Mike Smith being good? Is it going to be your bottom 6 adding to the score sheet? What's going to kind of be the biggest positive for you guys?
For sure. And if I can just even touch on the point that we made before when Michael was answering, I do agree that the Jets do have a deeper forward group. And when you get into a playoff series where a lot of the times the first and second lines can be shut down, it's that third and fourth line that can win you a playoff series. So if Winnipeg does win this series, I would expect that is a large reason why they were able to come out on top, is because their third line outperformed the Oilers' third line. It is going to largely come down to if McDavid and Draisaitl are going to be able to continue their level of success that they had in the regular season. But if the Jets can find a way to at least limit them offensively, then Connor Hellebuck playing out of his mind could also be a huge thing. We know that a hot goalie is the biggest thing when you get to the playoffs. And if you can win the special teams battle and you have the better goaltending, you'll probably win the series. So in that sense, I actually do think Winnipeg has a really good chance. And one of my best friends is a Winnipeg Jets fan. So I feel like I do a Winnipeg Jets podcast once a week that I don't even hit record on. But yeah, it's I hear a lot about your team, and just from watching them all year, I think these teams are fairly equal. It's not going to be a huge upset regardless of who wins. Whether if the Jets win in 5 or if the Oilers win in 5, I wouldn't say that it's a massive upset. I think they're equal, but they're equal teams for different reasons. The Oilers high end is superior to the Jets high end, but the Jets overall team construction is better than the makeup of the Oilers lineup. So that's kind of how I view that. And sorry, Liz, can you repeat the other question you had for me?
Oh yeah, it was kind of just like a lot of us, like I know sort of, I'll quickly jump on what Chris and I probably, our thoughts are basically, if our lines can be matched properly against the Oilers, we have a much better fighting chance. Like that's going to kind of be our big thing going forward, is the proper matchups, whatever. Like what is your, as an Oilers fan, looking at the Oilers' success, what you want them to do, what do you think is like the big thing that needs to happen for them to sustain positive results against the Jets, or just in general in the playoffs?
Well, I go back to the 2017 playoff run when Todd McClellan at the time separated Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and put them on separate lines. That began to be more difficult for the Anaheim Ducks to contend with. They did end up winning the series still, but putting them on different lines, having two MVP caliber scoring champions coming over the boards wave after wave, that is what sort of got the Oilers back into that series. And I wonder if for the Jets, when they have the McDavid line out there, he can produce with anyone. You could put Josh Archibald on his wing and pick and choose whatever left winger you're going to have next to him. He'll find a way to contribute offense no matter what. That Leon Draisaitl line, if he gets clicking with Nuge and Yamamoto again, that is where I think the Oilers could end up coming out on top, is because it's just the Jets will use their best defenders to probably handle the McDavid line regardless of who he's playing with. And then you have to hope that creates a better matchup for Leon Draisaitl when he hops over the boards.
You'd think so, Eric. You'd think that we'd put our best defenders out against McDavid. You'd think that, wouldn't you? But we don't.
Yeah.
No, but I actually, you said, oh man, where was I going to go with this? You said
separating McDavid and Draisaitl.
Yes. Okay. So that was something, like you said the whole thing about you could put McDavid with Josh Archibald. That's like, people always make jokes like Sidney Crosby made Chris Kunitz an Olympian. Like they're
right.
Good players can do good things with terrible players. Well, not terrible. That's not fair. But is this like a constant discourse among Oilers fans? Like, do they want Draisaitl and McDavid to play together? Do they want them on different lines, or is it pretty evenly split amongst the fan base?
Yeah, I think Tippett loves to put those two together, especially against some of the weaker teams in the division. Like he throw them together for a 3-game series against Ottawa, and they beat up on them where they get like 15 points in 3 games or something, or they did it against the Canucks. I don't love the idea of putting these two together against the Winnipeg Jets. I've got to give this team more credit than that. I worry that if they are able to shut down the McDavid Draisaitl line, the rest of the roster won't be able to produce enough offense to win this series. And they might be able to win a game or two, but to win 4 against a Vezina Trophy winning goaltender and the elite players you have up front, I think, just because the Oilers have the 2 leading scorers in the league, we can't forget that the Winnipeg Jets have some incredible offensive players too. I believe at one point this season, they had 3 of the top 20 scorers in the league. I don't know if it finished that way. I'd have to check, but it's not like the Jets are starving for offensive talent either. So that's where I'll give the Jets the tip of the cap there. So I would say they need to be separated in this series, because it just makes it, while it does make it harder for the time that they're out there, you're only going to see McDavid and Draisaitl on the ice for 20 minutes of that game. What's going to happen in the other 40 minutes? That's why I think they need to be on separate lines.
The only opposition I would have to that is I agree with something you said earlier, which was, I thought, a great point. I've always said in the playoffs, your top two lines basically offset, right? So the best team, the team that wins the cup has the most depth generally. And I don't know if that's right. It just feels that way, that whether they offset by not scoring or they score a similar amount of points, they offset. And then you get your fourth line guy that gets 7 goals in 5 games, whatever. This might be an exception to that, where we've seen Connor and Draisaitl absolutely destroy Scheifele and Wheeler, right? Where they could run them together and score enough points essentially themselves to not even worry about the other 3 lines. And that would be maybe the only exception I would see in this case. Tippett, I think, is a sort of coach that kind of leaves you guessing sometimes, and you never know what might happen, like you guys said. But I would say, if at the first sign that Maurice is playing Scheifele against that line, I would put them together. That would be me, and just go, then just kick their ass. Like just go for it.
Yeah, I think that's, a valid point. I think, though, in you're saying, like, a balanced team typically will go all the way, and it's been a while since obviously the Oilers have been out that far in the playoffs, but you always need a guy or a couple of guys that, are down in the lineup that are overperforming in the playoffs to kind of get you there. And that's exactly what you're talking about. It feels like a more balanced team, but typically those guys that you haven't expected to do well just come up and do that little extra. And
Fernando Pisani.
Yeah, Pisani's the first guy that comes to mind. But even recently in 2017 was Kassian. Right. He was, he was a wrecking ball for the Oilers. And, if you don't get those types of players, it doesn't matter who you have on your team. It's just too long of a playoffs to not, be successful. Of course, this is the first round still. So, lots can happen. And what's the I've got a question, but first, quick question. Maybe I'll ask both of them. What's the status on Ehlers? I understand he's possible for game 1. And then and then the second question is maybe along the lines of, what's your biggest fear for the Jets? Like, what could happen that you think would absolutely demolish this team's chances of winning at least the first round?
So Ehlers, I'm not totally sure. Most people are saying that he's probably not going to play in game 1, but I don't know about him personally, but this team doesn't seem to really care that much when guys are hurt. They'll let, like, if there's a chance that if he's going to be the one thing that beats us or that puts us over the Oilers, they're going to play him even if he's not ready. Like, I think that's how it's going to work. I think he'll probably be in game 2 or 3. I'm not totally sure, but I think he would be a big game changer. He's been our best skater this season without a question. And my big thing is that if Connor Hellebuyck plays human-like goaltending, we're screwed. And that's not fair of me to say, because we've had a lot of players who have stepped up a little bit this year, but also our guys with letters on the fronts of their jerseys need to be better as well. And I think if they play like they did at the beginning of the season, all 3 of them were atrocious at the beginning. If they play like that, and if Connor Hellebuyck plays like a normal goalie, we don't have a hope in hell. Anyways, those are my thoughts. Chris, I don't know about you.
Yeah, I see. Again, I we're not going to get into a co-hosting podcast where we shit on Paul Maurice, but it's something that we do quite frequently on our show, because you have the tools there. For me, I think the Jets have the tools to combat a team like this. Personally, what I'd like to see is them immediately, if Ehlers is healthy, I'd immediately like to see them go with the 4 centers that they have, rather than jamming them onto the 3 lines or even 2 lines like they have been. Again, you're going to give up what you're going to give up against McDavid. And so if you can play him against Lowry's line, okay, that might be great. Some people are suggesting a shadow with Dubois, just shadowing him. That might work too. Those things are only going to work if you're going 4 lines deep. If Nate Thompson is your 4th line center, you're not beating the Edmonton Oilers. You shouldn't be beating the Edmonton Oilers as far as I'm concerned. Those guys, those 4th line, as it turns out, kind of made us look bad this year. Trevor Lewis had a good season. Thompson was serviceable. My issue always is there somebody better? And there's better players than those guys. But you're not winning a playoff series or going deep in the playoffs if that's your lineup. But if Adam Lowry's your 4th line center, and he's playing against Connor McDavid, and that means that Paul Stastny and Matthew Perreault are playing against your third line. Well, I'll take that any day. You know what I mean? They should be able to outscore McDavid if that's the lineup. Our worry always on this end is what's it going to look like, and it never looks the way you think it should, and so that's where the scary part comes in. If they come out with the top six heavy and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be really disappointing and probably not give the results that we want.
And like you said, our team is very we're very prone to the matching 1 with 1, 2 with 2, 3 with 3, 4 with 4 kind of thing. Like it's a very which again, I'm not an NHL coach or anything, but I would like to see our defensive line play against the team that needs to be shut down the most. And like you said, we are going to give up. We're going to give up against McDavid and against Draisaitl. But if you're able to sort of isolate some guys that have that natural scoring touch, Nate Thompson, like you said, has been serviceable, but he is not a finisher. He is not a goal scorer, and you can't not have goal scorers in your bottom 6 when you can't count on your top 6 to be scoring goals in this series.
Yeah, agreed.
I want to know if you guys have sort of similar woes that we do when it comes to guys in your lineup. Like, do you have some guys in your lineup right now that just, they're stubborn, they won't come out, the coach won't take them out, and you have some prospects you'd like to see come in and play? Like, sort of do you like the 12 forwards and the 6 defensemen that you have right now? Or do you have some guys sort of coming up in the middle there that you'd like to see play in the playoffs? Or sort of what are your thoughts on your current roster versus your ideal roster?
I bet you Eric and I disagree on these things. So let's
I'll let you go first.
Oh yeah, well, you get to do the rebuttal.
Yeah.
So first off, I think, similarly, and it's understandable that if your goaltender is playing at a human caliber going into the playoffs, you're going to lose. You're going to lose a series. Goaltenders have to be outstanding come playoff times. And we were talking about the biggest challenge that you see for your team. I think as we saw today, Koskinen got lit up against Vancouver in the third period. It was, 3 goals, all, top glove. It's become a theme for him, and I think it's in his head. And so if, Smith happens to go down, and that's a big concern when you've got is he 39 now, Eric? 39-year-old
yes,
goaltender.
He just turned 39 in March.
Yeah. So when you have a 39-year-old goaltender, the concern is, how can he keep up with the level of play that needs to be done? So, and I believe we've got on the one back-to-back.
Monday,
couple nights.
Tuesday.
So that will affect the series somewhat. Now, in terms of personnel and who I'd like to see stay and who I'd like to see go, I think, and this is maybe Eric and I agree on the personnel, but we have tussled once or twice about how we feel about Tippett. I'm not a huge fan of the way he's put the lines together. You're probably a lot similar to the way you feel Maurice has put the lines together. And I think that he maybe we'll see. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt going into the playoffs. But if he keeps that Draisaitl and McDavid line together throughout the playoffs, I think this team's not going to go too far. They need to have at least two lines that do well. And I think going into the playoffs, there's not much more you can do. The lineup's going to be the lineup because that's who Tippett played all year. And so while I personally would have loved to see, we've got Bouchard sitting in the wings as a prospect and on the taxi squad. Really? I would have loved to see him. He played tonight or today. But you just can't, he's not played enough to play playoff hockey, right? And certainly he could come in and fill in if he had to, but I wouldn't want to see him play too much. I'm really curious as to what happens in terms of Chris Russell when he's ready to play.
He still exists.
He does. Yeah.
Hopefully he's not ready to play.
Yeah, he's not. He's out right now on injury. And then Zach Kassian. I mean, I'm kind of curious. The Tippett does rely a lot on his veterans, especially come playoff time. And sometimes in my mind, it's to his detriment. We'll see. That's my concern, is just that he gets stuck in an idea and he doesn't want to. I always felt like, if in the, post-game presser, if somebody asked him a question about why he didn't do something, he digs both feet in and does it again because somebody questioned his ability to do that, and right or wrong, that's kind of always how I felt about him. I think Eric probably agrees with the fact that the lineup's not going to change much from our regular season, but I think we disagree a bit on Tippett's Tippett's philosophy.
And it has nothing to do with the fact that Tippett's another Saskatchewan guy either. I'm not saying that. I'm just I look at here's how I try to look at it. Since Ken Holland and Dave Tippett took over in 2019, the Oilers have been far better than they were in terms of a management perspective and coaching perspective over the past decade. He's got a superior win ratio to loss ratio when you look at his time behind the bench as coach. So when a guy is getting these results, even if those results are largely driven by what Connor McDavid is able to do on the ice, I tend to trust that guy. And he's a Jack Adams Award winner. So, it's not like he's a bad coach by any means. Is there going to be times where we're going to be like shaking our heads? Why aren't you playing Evan Bouchard more? Why aren't you getting these guys in the lineup? Yeah, of course there is. In the pairings, you might want to change something. But at the end of the day, they finished with, I believe today, their 7th best regular season points percentage in franchise history. And if the decisions Tippett made led to that, I'm going to have faith that he gets them the rest of the way. And if that means relying more on veterans than bringing in young guys, then so be it. But there will come a time where they do have to, start playing these young guys in more meaningful roles.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
I was going to say, if I'm not mistaken, that's a Dave Tippett trademark. I was a Coyotes fan while the Jets were gone, and I could never figure out how Dallas was so good in the aughts when they really only had like 4 or 5 good players. And then same thing kind of goes when he coached the Coyotes, where he kind of, like you said, he really relied on a handful of guys and kind of worked them a lot. I guess the difference is who these guys are. They're a little better than Shane Doan and Radek Dvorak. So good people to be, trusting. So, but I think that's from my knowledge of Dave Tippett, that seems pretty standard as to how he's always behaved.
So what you're saying is I'm right and Eric's wrong. I like that.
I just, that's how he's always done it, whether it's right or wrong. I mean,
no, I'm just,
it's all good.
I'm going to say, Michael, that you're right and Eric's wrong, just because Eric says that's his coach and I don't know what that's like. So I'm, I have sort of I don't know if I want to call it a closing or not, because it might spur some conversation, but I want everyone to come up with their own. I'll start so that everyone has a minute to think about it, but I want you to pick one player from each team that you think is going to make or break this series for each team. And you don't say Connor Hellebuyck or Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, because Connor Hellebuyck is going to be Connor Hellebuyck. Connor McDavid is going to be Connor McDavid. Like, that's just so I think my wild card for the Jets is Pierre-Luc Dubois. We saw him last year against Toronto. You know what, Chris? Yesterday I said it was Mark Scheifele, so I've changed. I keep it's honestly both of them, and for the same reasons. I just think that when they're on, those guys are absolute powerhouses, and they could I don't think we've seen the most out of either of them this season. And I think, like I was just about to say, like when that Toronto series, like Pierre-Luc Dubois single-handedly won that series for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Like, he was extremely important to that team. And I think that player is still in him. I think he's just had a bit of a weird year, and we all know that. I've talked about it quite a bit. I don't think that we've seen the most out of him yet. And I think he's built for playoff type hockey, just that more physical game that still has the scoring touch and the proper. I just think he does a lot of things right. So I think he might be a massive wild card in this series. And then for the Oilers, I'm going to say my big wild card is I'm going to have 2 again, actually. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Mike Smith. I think if Mike Smith returns to the form that I, as a Jets fan, was expecting this year, I thought he was just going to be you know, a 39-year-old goaltender in the NHL, not like a legitimate, people are saying, hey, Mike Smith should win the Vezina, and I'm not laughing. I'm saying I don't think so, but I'm not laughing in their face. You know, he's had a good year. And I think that, I don't know if that's sustainable or not. He seemed to be pretty good all year, so maybe it is. But I think if he is not great during this series, then that could be a huge game changer for the Jets. And I think, on the contrary, if Ryder Nugent-Hopkins is a massive, if they do end up playing Draisaitl and McDavid on the top line, and Nugent-Hopkins has to anchor that second line, if he is on fire, then that's going to be really difficult to manage for the Jets. So those are my kind of wild cards. I don't know if I want to throw it to Eric next, and you can sort of come up with yours.
Oh, I mean, it's so hard to predict like who's going to have. I mean, we often say Fernando Pisani because that was such a big one in our market. I mean, I guess Zach Kassian to an extent did that in 2017 as well, where he played a physical role in scoring some big goals in that series against the Sharks as well. And if he comes back, I wonder if honestly he could be another guy who could help swing the series. You know, this might be a hard one to call, but I wonder if James Neal could get back to it. Like in the bubble last year, when he had those 4 months off to let his foot heal, he was skating better than I remember him seeing at any point during the regular season. And as of late, I think he hasn't looked terrible. And he's, you know, he scored a goal recently in Montreal. And I just wonder if someone like that with over 100 games of playoff experience, by far the most experience of anyone on the Oilers. And even though he is 33, so he's not, you know, that old yet, he's definitely past his prime. But I just wonder if he might be able to recapture some magic in a series or two and kind of be a player who could help the Oilers come out on top.
Yeah, he I think he's got like that, very much that what people always talk about, why we brought in Trevor Lewis. Like he knows how to win. And I think if you can get those guys going, they know how to play playoff hockey, they know how to win, like that could be really massive for you. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you have a Jets wild card?
A Jets wild card. Well, there's some names that stand out to me whenever I see like that Adam Lowry. Like he, you know, he's noticeable every time the Oilers play the Jets. And this is a guy that I didn't really follow or think too much ever about, even before this season. So after having watched him this much, I wonder if that's a guy who could have an impact at both ends of the ice and be a reason why the Jets are able to actually win a series.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer too. Yeah. Chris, I don't know if you want to go next.
Yeah, I think the obvious answer for Jets fans is Ehlers, for a couple of reasons. One is because of his health right now, and because of his playoff history that some people seem to think he has, which is just obnoxious. But I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to say Blake Wheeler. Yeah. I've been crapping on him all year. I love the guy, great player, great all-time player, but and it's not. And this is something we should qualify every time we talk about him. It's not his fault, the situation he's been put in. He was obviously told to play games when he was hurt. He's been playing top line minutes at 43 years old, I think he is now.
He's 34, he's not 40.
I'm just kidding. And that, so he's being put in these positions he shouldn't be put in. That said, this last 2 weeks, somebody's lit a fire under him. He's looked a lot better. He's likely healthy. We've seen him go to the net, which we haven't seen in a long time. So I'd like to see Blake Wheeler be the Blake Wheeler that gets paid $8 million a year at 34 years old, and see if he can't do something. So yeah, Ehlers is the obvious answer, but Wheeler's the guy we need. If you're gonna run that top line and all that kind of stuff, you need your captain to be, you know, we don't need Blake Wheeler to be our best player, let's be honest, but he needs to give us most of what he has given us before.
Yeah.
I'd also say about the Oilers, Mike Smith is probably my favorite player outside of the Winnipeg Jets. So I love Mike Smith. Oh yeah.
I have his Coyotes fan days.
Because Coyotes fan, I have his goal stick, autographed goal stick. And I like the fact that he wears like flat brim hats and kind of stuff like that. He's like kind of hip.
Chris, you're getting kicked out the podcast for saying that your favorite player outside of Winnipeg is not Patrick Laine. One of.
Didn't he recently say he's not cheering for the Jets in the playoffs?
Yeah. I don't care what he said. I don't care.
I thought that would hurt you guys to the soul.
He can't hurt me. I love him.
Okay.
I don't even know if it's that he's a player, but he's a cool dude, I guess is what I'm saying. But just hearing that there's a chance Chris Russell might play, that tells me that that's a wild card for sure, because I don't know how you guys feel about him, but obviously if there's any analytics involved, everybody knows what a terrible hockey player is. So that could really help the Jets if Chris Russell plays. Let's just put it that way.
I'm actually a Russell fan. I like Russell. I'm not sure that I'd be playing him full time, but I don't
think
mind
the
Chris
return
Russell
of
too much.
the return of Slater Cuckoo today and picking up Kulikov, who Jets fans will know very well at the deadline.
Yeah.
I think that, I'm not sure how much of an upgrade that is, but I think that it's enough that Russell probably won't be the first choice to come in and play the left side on D if they really needed someone.
No, that's a benefit for you guys.
Tippett will find a way to get him in the lineup.
I can't believe we haven't talked about Kulikov yet, though. I can't believe we didn't bring him up. He was like, we paid him $4.3 million, so we were kind of like, and then when he didn't sign with us, no one was upset because he made too much money. But then he went and signed in New Jersey, and then he became an analytics darling and just had like the best year ever. So that was who we actually did a massive trade deadline episode. We were talking about all the different options and how guys like, obviously we needed to upgrade our defense. Guys like, now I'm forgetting his name, David Savard, were way too expensive. And a lot of us wanted to bring back Dmitry Kulikov because of the year that he was having. And then, of course, he gets traded to the North Division. We're like, come on. So take care of our sweet prince. Yeah, go ahead, Michael. What are your thoughts?
Yeah,
here?
just quickly on that list. I think Kulikov's got a lot in him to be well, but he's struggled in his first little go round here with the Oilers. He's been giving up the puck a fair bit in zone, and
Kulikov is back.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think he's got lots more to give for the Oilers, so I'm not ready to write him off. But there's been a couple of times where I've been pretty upset with him. Okay, my thoughts. I'll start with the Jets, and I'll go a little bit off the board, maybe for both my picks. I think for the Jets, I've really liked when I've watched them, not just against the Oilers, but against some of the other teams, is Appleton.
Great answer.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's, he's done really well, right? I mean, for a guy that just to come into the league and then, he's had around a dozen goals this year so far, and I think that's the kind of guy that can, change a series with, some excitement and get everybody riled up and going, right? And people feel good for that kind of story, right? So,
I'll quickly jump on him just because I want to mention that we see a lot of top six flashes from. We think it's definitely there. Like what did he win AHL Rookie of the Year? I think. He's got, so if you have that guy playing on your third line, and like we've sort of talked about when Eric mentioned the Adam Lowry thing, if you can get that line scoring, that might be really massive. And he definitely has the scoring touch there. So anyways, sorry, I cut you off, but go ahead.
No, I think that's great. I mean, like I said, I've I'm not going to say I've been a fan, but I've been a fan of the way he plays. I like the player. So, if he does well, he'll do well for the Jets, and playoffs are the best time to see a guy like that do well. On the Oilers, a guy that I'd like to see turn it up and start to pot some goals and do that, and has certainly been given the opportunity, would be Cahoon. And so Dominic Cahoon, depending on where he plays, and a lot will depend, I think, on Kyler Yamamoto and what happens with him. He was out for a couple of games today. They haven't disclosed what the injury is, and if it's, I'm not sure if he's expected back for playoffs. I believe that he is. But I think if he is back, then we'll see what we call the dynamite line: Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto on the second line, and then we'll see Cahoon play up with McDavid. But Cahoon's actually, he's not put in the points we expected of him this year, I think, because everybody was excited about him and Draisaitl maybe clicking from when they played midget hockey together and scored at will. it never came to fruition, but he seemed to have found a place on McDavid's line. And sometimes a guy like that just, if he's the right guy for a player like McDavid, can, turn the tide and make that, make McDavid even that much better, and then watch out, right? Like, I think then the league's on notice, and it could be a hell of a playoffs for Edmonton. So I'll take Kahun. I don't think I'd take Smith, except, I'm done thinking he's a surprise. Like, I thought he was a surprise the first 10 games. He's proven himself. And so, I would be more surprised if he didn't play well. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I'm a closeted Blackhawks fan too. That was my team kind of before the Jets came back, so I watched a lot of their games. And Dominic Kahun was with them a couple years ago, and that's definitely there's a lot of potential there, I think. So that's a good choice. I didn't even think of him. So quickly, I want to know what is going to be your top six going into the playoffs? Like, not what you think. What is your team going to run with their top six? Is it going to be, like you said, a Kahun with McDavid and Puljujärvi, or what's kind of what are they going to run?
Yeah, I think, Eric, I'll let you answer, but my guess would be, it would be Kahun, McDavid, Puljujärvi, Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto, assuming Yamamoto's back in the lineup.
That's a nice top six.
Yeah, it is a good top six.
I mean,
I agree.
And I don't even mean that because McDavid and Draisaitl. Like, those are six really good players.
Well, I mean, exactly, Chris. To that point, it's been a long time since the Oilers have been able to say that they have six legitimate top six forwards. There's been some guys who definitely were not top six caliber playing in the top six over the past decade or longer. And, to have Dominic Kahun, as Michael just kind of mentioned a minute ago, yeah, he hasn't provided enough offense to consistently stay on one of the Oilers' top two lines, but he is a player who Lyss mentioned, sorry if I can talk, has the skill to play with skilled players. Like, he was on a line with Malkin. He played with skilled players in Chicago. He's showing glimpses of his talent with McDavid now. And I just wonder, him, and you got a guy like Jesse Puljujärvi on the other side who's had a breakout year that no one saw coming. I thought he might be able to come back and reestablish himself as a solid third liner. But for him to actually be able to step up this much in the lineup and be a contributor the way he has, I think that is a legitimate top line, especially when you have, the Art Ross Trophy winner between them. And as for the second line, Yamamoto does have to get going, but we have seen that skill from him in a small sample size. He was a point-a-game player last year in a 27-game sample, like I said, and then this year started off with 8 points in his first 12 games before his scoring fell off. Just snake bitten all year, couldn't buy a goal. If he's able to rekindle something with Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins, I really like this top six. It's certainly better than some of the ones that we've seen over the years. I mean, Patrick Maroon played a top six role with the Oilers for a year and a half and scored 27 goals on McDavid's wing. So not to take anything away from Maroon, but if he can be close to a 30-goal scorer, imagine what a legitimate sniper could do standing next to Connor McDavid. I mean, if David Pastrnak was on his wing, does he score 60 goals? That's just, I'm far-fetching here, but that's the point I'm trying to make.
What about Taylor Hall? How many goals does Taylor Hall score on his wing?
Yeah, you know what? They tried them together. I know you're giving me a hard time, but they tried them together in 2015-16, and actually Hall clicked way better with Draisaitl. So
yeah, but and I'm not trying to give you a hard time.
No, it's all good.
Long term, that's just an absolute. I mean, that's 50 goals a year from Taylor Hall. I mean, that's crazy. Sad. I've defended the Oilers for a long time because I hate that. Well, I hated them. Like, obviously, as a kid, I grew up in the 80s. I saw it all, blah, 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 blah. But I defended the new Oilers simply based on the media outlook and sort of even the fan outlook that the problem was the drafting. And other than what's his nuts, Yakupov, they drafted the right player every time. It was the cast around them, and it was the fact that you couldn't find a defenseman. It was the fact that you couldn't find a bottom six, and everybody's trying to blame it on Eberle and Hall and all this stuff. And it's like, dude, it's not those guys. Those guys can only do so much. How about get them not like an ECHL third line and fourth line, and then maybe you've got a team. And it's something that I've never gotten over.
I'd say that it's not so much drafting, but it's how they develop the prospects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either way,
that was
sure.
big.
Draft and destroy, baby. Let's go.
That's exactly it, Liz. You hit it on that.
To jump on. I think it was Eric was talking. It was so funny. You were talking about Dominic Cahoon. Literally, if you would have replaced his name with Andrew Kopp, that's exactly what we have in Andrew Kopp. It's so funny. Like, you're talking about how you see, like, he's, been fringe, top 6, bottom 6, whatever. He fits the roles. There's a ton of top 6 potential there. Anyways, I just thought it was hilarious. We basically have the same player in the way that you're describing him. I can't say I know a ton about Dominic Cahoon. I've just watched him play a couple of games.
For sure.
But I just thought that was quite fun.
And also, Chris, first of all, I have no ill will towards the Jets. We haven't had the chance to build up any hatred for them.
Yeah.
Now this is from me. Like, I missed out on the dynasty era in Edmonton where they had the better of the Jets. So I fully get it from that perspective of Jets fans not liking the Oilers. Like, they have every right to not be a fan of them. I grew up watching the Oilers get dismantled by the Dallas Stars in the playoffs every year. So that was, I disliked them more than the Calgary Flames growing up.
That's right.
And I mean, I should have guessed from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle behind you and the Michael Jordan cards that you did grow up in the 80s. So that would have tipped me off right there too. But no, I completely understand that. And it's like, maybe we'll get a little more of the rivalry intensified in the next 2 weeks. I told my Jets friend that you're probably going to hate my team more than ever before as we really amp things up here.
I feel bad because everyone knows, like, I have like probably my 4: Toronto, Edmonton, Vegas, and St. Louis. I cannot stand them from but the former two, and what I said, it's more of the media issue that I have with them, and I hate them as a result of my hate for the media. Like, it's more like, I wasn't alive in the 80s when all that happened. I don't care about the Jets 1.0. I don't know anything about them. But just when it's like, Nick Giller scored 2 goals and had a great game, but it's like, we have to start off the highlight reel with a picture or a video of Connor McDavid in warm up, just like a lot of that stuff. And it's made me just like Connor McDavid, which isn't fair. Like, I loved it. Like, I have Connor McDavid shirts and whatever. Like, as when he was a prospect playing in the World Juniors, I just thought he was terrific and stuff. But it's just, the media has made me dislike Edmonton so much. And then there's always Darnell Nurse is a bug, Zach Cassian's a bug, and then it's just when you already have a little bit of distaste for a team, it just makes you so. And then also, I don't know if where you guys are on this, but I'm also a bit of a Leon Draisaitl hater, just because I'm so mad that last year everyone who voted looked at Connor McDavid and said, actually, Leon Draisaitl is more valuable than you. That will never sit right with me. Not Leon Draisaitl's fault, but it makes me mad.
I mean, last season, you have to remember, Connor was coming back from potentially a career-altering injury. So the fact that he was even able to play at all after opting to not have surgery and to rehab his knee on his own, that was a miracle in his own, that the knee fully healed. But without even having an off season to properly train, you figured, well, he's probably going to have a bit of dip in scoring this year. He actually still finished second in league scoring behind Leon Draisaitl. And if he didn't miss 7 games with a quad injury in March, he might have passed him. That being said, when one guy has 110 points and no one else even has 100, it makes it hard for the writers to not vote for the guy. But I do understand that where other fans are coming from. They're looking at this from, the outsider's perspective and saying, how can anyone on a team with Connor McDavid be voted the MVP? So I get where you're coming from there.
Yeah,
I love that.
that's the way the part works, though, is that the guy led the league in scoring. Like, that's insane. And he led the league in scoring with Connor McDavid on his team. So there's something to be said about that. The fact that he could outscore him is pretty impressive, even if.
Well, he took the Oilers through their hardest stretch too, which without Connor McDavid, he was outstanding.
But yeah, I don't know. That's just also just who I don't like the Hart Trophy in general, just because I find the criteria so, like, Connor McDavid should win the Hart Trophy every year. So like, I wish they would change the criteria a little bit so that it's more like kind of.
They need two trophies. They need a Hart Trophy, and they need a valuable to your team and an outstanding player.
Exactly.
Well, they also need, but it's the players vote. Right?
Yeah, the players vote.
Yeah, but it hasn't been struck into our mentality yet that one is one and one is the other, right? Because again, I don't agree that Connor McDavid should win it every year, because if there's a year they finish second last in the league, well, they would have finished second last in the league with or without him. So you have to have a good production. There's the year Sean Burke was in the talking for MVP and Naginla won it. Well, the freaking Flames finished like 24th in the league. They would have finished what, 26th
We
in the
can
league
all
without
hate the
Jerome
Flames
McGinley?
together, by the way.
Exactly. But that just goes back to what Lyss was saying about the media thing. I don't blame the media for, hitching their ride to Matthews and McDavid and them being the lead story. That's what every other league does. But it does give a foul taste, right, to the other teams. And my bigger problem with the Oilers stuff when the Jets were gone was all of my friends that became Canucks and Flames and Oilers fans. How can you hate it, those teams for 15, 18 years? They beat you out of the playoffs. Yeah. They're your arch rivals. And then all of a sudden you're walking around in a Canucks jersey? Nah, that doesn't sit right with me.
No, I understand that perspective too. And it's just like, Winnipeg, it's a shame that a city that has as rich a hockey tradition as they do, going back to the WHA, and even before, if you want to really go back 100 years in history to when they were winning Stanley Cups, in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I mean, the glory days. Yeah, it's a hockey city. And for them to not have a team for 15 years, it just felt wrong. And now that it's been back for a decade, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a Jets fan. Maybe it feels like they never left now that they're back. And it's just that decade seems to have flown by from an outsider's perspective anyway.
So I do have one thing that I have to say, and I should be thankful for the Jets.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a dig, actually. But the Oilers have never won a Stanley Cup without playing the Jets in the playoffs.
Right.
It's true. It's true.
So,
you're welcome.
And in fact, the Jets are the only team that have that.
But you know what? There was a lot of years where even the Jets were a very good team in the NHL. Like I think one year they finished fourth in the league, if you look at total standings, but they were third in their own division.
Well, we were just talking about like how much different would Howard-Chuck be viewed in this league, right? Yeah. If not for the Oilers, right? Like if not for that, the guys that were there. I mean, outside of Winnipeg, I mean, people still appreciated Howard-Chuck, but absolutely, he could have been, somebody completely different, like larger than life, if not for some of those players.
Well, and going back to the first thing that Eric had said when you were talking about the whole Gretzky versus McDavid thing, like having the hardware to show for it kind of thing. And that's with the Howard-Chuck, it's going back to that era. It's tough to, for sure. Chris,
I was a big Howard-Chuck fan, by the way.
Good for you.
As you should have been, right? Yeah, being a fan of hockey.
In Wayne Gretzky's first book, I don't know what it's called, the white one with the red cover, he says if it wasn't for the Oilers, the Jets would have won multiple Stanley Cups. We were the only team, I think, in NHL history still to have 6 30-goal scorers on a team in one season. No,
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, we were fantastic. And again, it's crazy, right? But there was a couple of years where we were legit contenders. So you guys definitely caused a 10-year-old Chris to cry and stay up too late and not, it's it'd be interesting now.
We can all cry together, Chris.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny when I try to kind of get Lyss is less than half my age. So it's funny when we talk about past things and like she just said, I don't care about 1.0 or I mean, I don't really anymore either, to be honest. Like I'm glad that I got to go to 15 games the year Solani broke the record, but other than that, I try to leave it in the past other than my jersey collecting. So I mean, it's a long time ago, and let's hope, like you guys said, let's hope this rekindles something. Most of the time playoff series do, almost always. So let's hope that happens, if nothing else.
I said my teams that I hate, and I said for the former two in my thing, it was because of the media. Well, the latter two, guess what? It's because they beat us in the playoffs, and I hate them for it. But I love that you said that we can all hate on the Flames together, because I am still never gonna forgive Matthew Tkachuk for being.
Yeah, I was just gonna say my Jets fan friend and I, there aren't a ton of things we agree on when it comes to hockey, but one thing that we've always been in perfect unison about is that our disdain for Matthew Tkachuk. And I'm glad to see that that hatred that the Oilers had built up for Tkachuk over the past 5 years really hit home in Winnipeg last year in the bubble. And I don't think that will disappear anytime soon.
Yeah.
Which is
they're too crappy for me to really care that much about them. Like if they were better, I would probably hate them more, but they suck now, and I'm like, well, that's good for you. But yeah, no, he's just a friggin' bug. I can't stand the guy.
It's funny how they're hated in Winnipeg, and especially considering people still hate his dad, despite the fact that all reports are Keith Tkachuk is like all-time one of the nicest players in NHL history. If you read Jeremy Roenick's book, he spends about half the time talking about Keith Tkachuk and what a great person Keith is. And
Jeremy Roenick?
Well, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, it doesn't matter the source if he's telling you what all of these great things that Keith has done. And people have a bad taste because back when he was an 18-year-old kid in Winnipeg and doing stupid shit in Winnipeg, people never liked the person. So it's funny that it's continued despite from everything I've heard, that Keith is just an awesome dude, just an awesome dude.
The other thing is too, there's always going to be that off the ice stuff. I mean, Chris Pronger had a rough start to his career in Hartford, where I think he was getting into, I don't know the exact stuff, but it was almost some legal issues where something happened in a bar or whatever, and they had to get him out of there, where they traded him to St. Louis. We've heard all the stories about someone running into Taylor Hall at a bar in 2011 and he wasn't nice to them, and dancing on top of a pool table or whatever the stories are. And it's just, do we condemn these people for what they did at 18, 19 years old? And first of all hearsay for first of all, or do we let them grow as people and become better individuals off the ice, and also look at what they provide on the ice too? I think, so there's always going to be times like that where people just get beat up on for maybe the person they were at 18. No one is the best version of themselves at 19 years old.
Yeah. Vander Kane would like to join this podcast right now too. So
And as a 19-year-old, I do say I agree. Let's not base my entire life on
this is it, Liz.
No, but I also wanted to jump on quickly, just kind of a fun little thing to end. I think it's hilarious too that the Edmonton media really does want to push a personality on Connor McDavid. I just don't really think that it's there. Some of my favorite things from the NHL have come from guys, check out this awesome banter about the World Juniors, Leon Draisaitl versus Connor McDavid. Look at them argue with each other. Leon Draisaitl says something like kind of funny, and Connor McDavid's like, I just hope both teams have fun. Or like
the most personality you're ever going to see from McDavid is when he cried the night he found out he was going to Edmonton on national TV.
The best part about being a hockey player is being a hockey player. That's my favorite thing. He had to fill it like a little.
Actually, if you ever want to watch, GQ magazine did an interview with Wayne Gretzky and Connor McDavid. I think it was last summer, 2020. And they didn't even have an interviewer for them. They had them interview each other.
Oh, no.
So if you ever want to see Wayne Gretzky ask Connor McDavid questions about hockey, and then have Connor McDavid ask questions to Wayne Gretzky, I'll put it to this. He's great at a lot of things, but an interviewer might not be a secondary. He might not have a career in media, I'm saying, after his playing career.
That's a funny thing that's been pointed out multiple times, too. I mean, Wayne Gretzky doing it, too, because one thing you always hear, like you'll hear about certain guys, like Teemu Selänne's the nicest guy and this and that and all that. You never hear that about Wayne Gretzky. All you ever hear about Wayne Gretzky is what a great hockey player he was. I've heard that he's not the best, but when you listen to people, like even media, they'll never say that about him, right? They'll say, like I say, Shane Doan, nicest guy, blah, 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 blah. Like I said, Roberto Luongo, whatever. They never say that about Gretzky. They always just say great hockey player, best hockey player of all time.
Also, it's kind of hard to overshadow his accomplishments, though. Like, if I'm talking about Wayne Gretzky, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the fact that he's the greatest to have ever played. Yeah. So, I'll take it with a grain of salt, Chris. I don't know, but I'm not sure.
I think he's pretty nice. I think he is a nice.
You know what? The odd story that you've ever heard about Wayne, and there's been very few. I think that he, going back to when he was very early in his career, has been very conscious of his public image.
Sure.
And always humble to a fault. So if there was an event where he was at and someone had a bad takeaway from it, I truly believe, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a Wayne Gretzky fan, is that would be in the minority, because
for sure.
You know what I mean? I think that I believe he is genuinely a nice person, but even if he wasn't, I think he's such an ambassador for the sport that he realizes that he can't have like a public meltdown where it would look bad on him. That's just
I think it's like the Tiger Woods kind of Michael Jordan up until 2007 Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan type personality, where it's more like an indifferent and professional. I don't go too high or too low personality. I just heard some, and again, this is when he's young too, and the most famous person in Canada.
Well, there's not many Roniks out there, right?
They're all like, well, that's a funny thing. That's how one of the things I have to back up the Kachuk thing. One year I met Shane Doan at a Flames game, and I met his mom, and I talked to his mom for about 25 minutes. And this is when the Coyotes should have been really good. And she was one of the people that told me that Roenick was just a huge problem in the locker room, and that Keith was awesome and blah blah blah, but they wanted to get rid of Roenick because he was just a problem and nobody liked him. And so that was from the captain's mom's mouth, so it's not, it's not BS or whatever. So Roenick definitely was the problem there for sure, but it's funny.
So I've known a lot of hockey media over time. One of the things I actually, one of my roommates was a former writer, wrote about the Flames. And so, the odd time I'd answer my home phone and it would be Jerome McGinley on the phone. And he lived in my community, and I'd run into him. He's a good example of the Connor McDavid type of thing, where these guys have created a product, right? And they, outside of, if you saw when McDavid hit 100 points, if you saw the way the team lit up, like the big smiles on the bench and how happy they were for him, it doesn't speak to a guy that has zero personality, but the guy that we see in the media every day literally has zero personality, right?
Yeah,
but because that's the McDavid product.
Yeah.
And but on the reciprocal to that is look at Draisaitl. Like he's a pretty open and freewheeling guy. The last hockey game I got to watch, Draisaitl got on the microphone and at the end of the game and said, the fans here are effing phenomenal, right? Like over the loud, the PA, right?
Yeah.
And that's Draisaitl. Like he's, he doesn't have the necessarily, because he's under the shadow of McDavid, he doesn't have to have that same product that McDavid does, and so we'll never. And I think
you never really know them.
Yeah, I think to some extent, Gretzky's the same way. Like they are such a big product that they have to watch.
Well, he's called a robot,
everything.
like a hockey playing robot. That's been kind of something that people have been saying for years. And I've seen Connor McDavid interviewed after scoring a hat trick. And the best way I could describe the look on his face is pissed off.
Yeah.
Like, so, if you have a guy who's that intense, like it's almost like he's got Jonathan Taves intensity and he's got like Mario Lemieux's hands and Pavel Bure's speed and Wayne Gretzky's brain. That's like, these are like the components that like I say make up Connor McDavid.
I agree with you guys so much. When he got that 100th point, I was like, where is that dude? Jumping off the glass, pumping, fist pumping and everything. I was like, that's awesome that he gives that, and yeah, that's great. I just got to say also, I'm pretty envious that you get to watch that guy 82 games a year, because when he first came in the league, I was trying to switch back and forth just to catch his shifts. And it's next level. Like I said, I got to see Timu when he was here. And
awesome. Yeah.
And there's the same sort of speed element, but nothing like what McDavid does. It's just incredible.
I'm a huge Solani fan too.
That's what we've talked about this too. It's like, hey, this series is gonna go one way or the other. One way for us, the Jets win. The other way, we get to watch Connor McDavid play more playoff hockey. So you know what? I can't. And honestly, thank you guys for coming. You guys are a lot. I think you're a little bit nicer than we are. Chris and I are a little bit kind of like, yeah, these are all the reasons why the Jets suck, but they're still so much better than your team. No, but this was good. It's always fun to hear from other teams' perspectives and stuff like that, especially when we're going to be seeing a lot more of this team. It's been nice. These divisions have been a ton of fun and stuff like that. So it's going to be nice to see them continue in the playoffs. I hope, there doesn't get too dirty and there doesn't get to be a ton of like injuries or anything like that. But it's the playoffs. That's what'll happen. But it's been a ton of fun. And I think we have some good hockey coming our way over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, excellent.
Definitely. Thank you for having us too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks
for
so
sure.
much.
Yeah. So Chris, Michael, Eric, thank you so much. And yeah, take care.
You too.
Perfect.